Asunder. After the War of the Worlds. For more information, please visit servingworlds.com. Written and performed by John Miro.
Hobe landed the longboat with barely a bump. An admirable job, Marcus thought, considering the welcoming party had been yelling at them to show their hands and make no sudden moves all the while. A landing party bounded up the stairs, screaming and pointing rifles. Mostly young faces, some scared, some watering in the smoke collecting in Midway, all red with fury. They were roughly escorted off the boat and brought to one of the few soldiers wearing a helmet with the white covered up. A scowling bear of a man sporting a handlebar mustache. The soldiers called him Captain Geary. Geary was known to Marcus, and he had a feeling it was mutual as the captain's eyes slid past him and past Hobe. Perhaps he was wrong. They settled on Burns, though, and relaxed slightly. "Lieutenant Burns, isn't it?" "Yes, sir," Owen said, and saluted crisply. "I take it you didn't know our situation," Geary said sharply, "or else God knows why you would bring citizenry down here." "Until recently, Captain Riggs and his first mate worked on the project, sir. There was an attack on the harbor, and we thought it prudent to report it in person." "I see," Geary sighed. "At ease. Back to your posts," he barked to the guards, waving them off. They all returned to their posts. The captain rubbed at his face. Soot stained the right-hand side, and a few bloody scratches the left. "It was a two-pronged attack, as you can well see," Geary murmured. "The pirates used the attack on the bay," Marcus thought aloud, "to distract you down here in Midway. That left soldiers' backs turned, and there was no way around it. Someone had told the pirates where to hit, and when." "What's happened, sir?" Burns asked. Geary turned to another soldier carrying a clipboard and took up review of the papers on it. 12 or 14 men, he muttered, without raising his eyes, armed with invader weaponry and something else that jammed our ether sets. He handed the clipboard back to the junior officer and traded quick salutes before the man hurried off. They fled towards France with 4 longboats stocked with what they could take and several prisoners. He waved at the devastation. Their own light invader craft did this and kept their defenses busy. Guarded their escape, too, when they were done. We haven't heard from the French side of the tunnel since. "Request permission to pursue, sir," Burns practically bellowed, and Captain Geary smiled. "Good man, but I've already dispatched a team." The smile clouded, and it seems the buggers blew the cavern behind them on their way out, and took out my men. Hobe hunched his shoulders and looked up nervously. "The water!" Geary's tremendous mustache bristled. "Hold your water, man. We'd all be dead if the walls had breached." He waved at the back of the man with the clipboard, now loading injured soldiers onto the longboat Marcus and the others had come in on. "My engineer and his gizmos assure me the tunnel is sound." "How did they know about the Mousehole at all?" Marcus asked. Geary fixed him with a glare. "If you're free to say, sir," Marcus quickly added. Geary humphed, but his glare disappeared. "Don't know as they did. Pirates have been hitting every outpost they can, getting more brazen every time, too." The pirates had first made travel on the high seas a dangerous act, and now they were driving inland hard. Marcus felt a cold anger at the thought of human brigands profiting from the invaders and piling on the misery they caused. Still, there was more to the Folkestone attack than chance. He knew it. Marcus heard the hum of an incoming longboat, and turned to see the purple glow of the machine carrying it aloft. Reinforcements finally coming in. "Why don't somebody tell them there's still invaders up there?" Hobe said. "We got better things to do than fight ourselves, long as they're tossing rocks down at us." Geary was throwing his glare at Hobe now, but Marcus quickly drew it back when he stepped close to the man and whispered, "Respectfully, we must expect they know about the project." "Yes, damn it!" Geary waved a hand, both in anger and to shut Marcus up. "We've begun the retreat." "You can't do that," Hobe squeaked. "You can't just leave all this for them." Marcus knuckled Hobe in the ribs to shut him up. If the last months had taught him anything, it was to work around the military mind to get what you wanted. You never just called them out. Geary caught the movement and considered Marcus again. Marcus watched the light dawn on his face. "I do know you. You're the man who brought the first walker in to Dr. Grace." Marcus ignored the barely swallowed insult and nodded. "I am, Captain, and I think we'd best speak with Colonel Barton." Geary looked away. "I am responsible for the Mousehole now." Marcus read the true meaning of his words in the captain's face. "Colonel Barton's dead." "How?" "Chopping the head off a pirate, my dear. It was something to behold." Marcus knew the good doctor's voice and was smiling before he turned. Then he was shocked to see the look on the doctor's white face was not a smile. The wretch Barton dispatched clenched his fingers around his weapon when the colonel's sword tickled his spine, sliced the poor colonel in two. At just over 6 feet, Dr. Grace stood eye to eye with Marcus. He held one frilly cuff before him, a monogrammed handkerchief pressed against the nose in the center of his long face. He wore his favorite black velvet smoking jacket, his hair slicked back and his face clean-shaven, as was his custom. His eyebrows were plucked, trim and tidy, though dirt and tears showed, and his mouth looked strange without its immortal, daring grin. "Dr. Grace!" Marcus shook the doctor's hand firmly, and the man laughed, a bit too hysterically. Marcus observed a cut just below the doctor's hairline, and the pocket of his velvet smoking jacket was torn almost completely free. His hand was trembling in Marcus's. "He died defending me, you see," Dr. Grace said distantly, and held onto Marcus's hand harder. His eyes were watery again. "To think, the silly old fart hated us mandrakes, and he died defending me." Captain Geary coughed. His face beat red. Even in the new world the invasion ushered in, it wasn't every day a homosexual came right out and announced himself, especially before men such as Geary. Still, Marcus gave the captain points for good behavior when he stepped closer to the doctor with no outward signs of his disgust. "Sir, you cannot be out in the open. Your understanding of the invader technology is key to... Yes, of course you want to hide me away, Doctor," Marcus said quietly, and his friend's voice trailed off. "The attack may not be over, despite appearances. Let's not waste the colonel's sacrifice, seeing you hurt or captured now." Dr. Grace's eyes went wide, and he gasped, theatrically and loudly. He couldn't help himself, Marcus knew. It was who he was, and, histrionics and all, Marcus was very fond of this eccentric doctor of science. "Are those blighters still lurking?" He turned on his elegant, wing-tipped black leather shoes and ran up the stairs from the longboat dry dock to the wide boardwalk that formed the floor of Midway Outpost. Marcus turned back to the captain. "I'd like to see the doctor packed up, and then I'd like to help with the evacuation. I catalogued a lot of the machines down here. I know what's most valuable, what we shouldn't leave behind." "The only place you're going, sir, is the stockade." Marcus turned very slowly. Another man stood behind Captain Geary, who now stood at ramrod straight attention, his face a blank slate. 2 soldiers stood further back, their weapons drawn, but pointed to the ground. The newcomer, a thin, black-haired man with a carefully trimmed Van Dyke beard, was obviously the senior rank present. His chest full of ribbons and spotless parade uniform were also clear evidence of that. "You are relieved, Captain," came the shrill voice from the direction of the newly arrived longboat. Captain Geary saluted. "Lieutenant Colonel Merry, these men are no trespassers. They were reporting—" "You sure of that, are you?" barked the lieutenant colonel. "You can be sure this American has no ties to the pirates, can you?" The officer stalked past the captain and glared into Marcus's face. "This man is in the books as a profiteer. What's to say he didn't sell us out to the pirates, too?" Marcus stared slightly down into the pinched nose and dark green eyes of the lieutenant colonel. Mary's lip curled in a look of disgust. "Why shouldn't I shoot you right now, darky?" he whispered in close. Marcus's blood froze. "You will not!" Lieutenant Colonel Merry didn't break his hateful gaze as he addressed the stricken voice of Dr. Grace. "Yes, I was informed of your friendship with the captain, Dr. Grace. That does not mitigate the fact that your friend purloined valuable government property in time of war." "I hate profiteers' rigs," Mary almost smiled then. "I'd be within my rights to hang him right now." Hobe leaped forward when Lieutenant Colonel Mary uttered the word hang. Marcus tried to fix him with an angry glare to make him stop, without making some sudden movement that might see Mary carry through on his threat of execution right on the spot. He gave a silent prayer of thanks that Lieutenant Burns was there to restrain his friend. Not that Hobe appreciated having his arms locked behind his back, but Marcus ignored his explosive burst of profanity and gave Burns a brief nod. Burns returned the nod, grim-faced and silent. Marcus stayed frozen in place, but his eyes looked past Mary's furious gaze. Half a dozen soldiers had appeared, drawing a bead on him with both human and invader artillery. Captain Geary was red-faced. "Lieutenant Colonel Mary, these men reported in. They respected my authority. I do not understand." "We're at war, Captain," Mary barked, "and this man was caught leaving Folkestone with an invader weapon aboard his ship. Isn't that right, Burns?" "Yes, sir," Burns croaked. Hobe growled and struggled against Lieutenant Burns's hold. "Just stop struggling, you idiot," Marcus willed his friend. "Stolen weapon, my arse." Mary blinked and finally broke his cruel stare, searching for the doctor who'd spoken. "Excuse me?" Dr. Grace leapt down off the stairs, holding his smoking jacket open like a cape. The lieutenant colonel stumbled back, obviously keen to avoid contact with the doctor. Marcus watched even greater revulsion creep onto the lieutenant colonel's face than the racism that had been reserved for him. "That cannon was a gift from me for his outstanding service, and if you should ever want another ounce of my outstanding service, you will rinse all this punishment nonsense out of your mouth right bloody now." Marcus stared at the bellowing doctor, momentarily at a loss for words. Someone, somewhere, began ringing an alarm bell. Shouts covered other shouts. "Lieutenant Colonel!" Marcus watched a ruddy-faced man, with his hair drawn back in a tail, wearing lieutenant stripes, jump down off the stairs. "They're coming back down!" Mary jerked straight, eyes growing wide. Marcus thought at first it was fear, but when the man smiled, he knew it was something even worse. Marcus had met this type before, rich members of the upper classes aching to prove themselves in battle. Lieutenant Colonel Mary was excited. "Lieutenant Jonas, see to the defenses here." The ruddy-faced lieutenant at his right hand nodded, his lips pressed into a thin line. "How many civilians are still down below?" "Just a few, sir. None that worked on the project but Dr. Grace. He didn't care to attend the conference in town." "No time for a fancy dinner hobnobbing with politicians," Dr. Grace shuddered. "I'll leave that to you, Mary." Mary's face turned into a snarl. The doctor's face quickly grew animated, however, and he clapped his hands together. "Right then, Marcus, Hobe, and I will pillage my lab for whatever their strong backs can carry." Mary fixed Marcus with one last ugly stare. "Very well, doctor. Your friend can carry your bags for you." With that, he hurried on up the stairs. Marcus watched the man go, taking note to be very careful around the Mousehole's new military commander. "Guess what you can carry," Dr. Grace taunted Mary under his breath with a gentle thrust of his hips. "Oh, why couldn't you have been up in the town with the other dullards?" Then he pointed a long, manicured finger at Marcus. "Did you at least get to fire it?" "Thank you, Owen," Marcus called, glaring at Hobe to stop him from provoking Burns, who released him with a pat on his shoulder. "I'm sorry, what?" Marcus asked the doctor, struggling to make sense of the quickly departing crowd of officers that only moments ago had trained their weapons on him. "The cannon, man! How did she work?" Marcus grinned. That was the doctor he knew, a child at heart. Sliced a flyer in half. "Come, doctor, we must get your things." Just then there was a rumble and a bright light from far down the tunnel. The doctor yelped in fright. Captain Geary and Lieutenant Jonas continued shouting orders to the assembled soldiers. The very next moment, the cavern was alight with weapons fire. The captain's head jerked up towards the boardwalk, and a moment later bodily threw himself against the doctor, pushing him and Marcus back into the beams beneath the stairs. Then Geary was falling backwards, and Marcus stared through the head-sized hole in his chest to see Lieutenant Burns grab the rifle from one of Mary's guards, still falling to his death, and fire wildly at somebody atop the stairs. They were here all along. Marcus felt a rumble through his feet, his chest. He felt himself scream his fear and couldn't hear his own voice. The explosion that took it was so very close. Not just a mole in their ranks, Marcus thought numbly, watching Captain Geary tumble lifeless to the floor. He felt the heat at his side as Owen fired above his head and looked up in time to see a man in a filthy shirt fall off of the stairs above, his body engulfed in flame. Someone grabbed him under the arm and hauled him to his feet. Marcus looked up to see Hobe. He was saying something, but the words were lost. Marcus knew his engineer well enough to guess it was a profane-laden speech urging them to flee. Hobe led him to a small door beneath the stairs. Lieutenant Burns was close behind, one arm draped protectively over a white-faced Dr. Grace's shoulder. In the dim light beneath the boardwalk, they made their way over the uneven rock of the cavern floor. More explosions rattled the earth, and light flared down from flaming planks above them. Marcus's hearing returned to him, and he tapped Hobe to release him. The anguished screams all around him almost made him wish that the roaring in his ears hadn't abated. He'd hoped never to hear these sounds again, and truly believed he never again would from men fighting men. Not after the invaders had come. What a stupid people are we, he thought. The dark recess beneath the boardwalk widened, and foul odor filled the air. "Oh, dreadful," Dr. Grace moaned. Marcus sympathized. The stench of 100 men's excretions assaulted his nostrils, but they were alive, and quite possibly in the last place the pirates would search for them. More explosions above. Bars of orange light flashed between planks on the boardwalk, then winked out, temporarily blinding them. "Keep moving," Marcus hissed and took the lead, leading the group along a narrow stretch of rock walkway with ropes and poles to either side, and deeper moats of waste to either side as well. His feet splashed through patches of offal, the consistency of thick mud. His stomach rolled. He ignored it all and ran faster. The foul pools grew ankle-deep, and Marcus dug through happier memories to keep his stomach's urging to vent itself at bay. His feet continued to splash forward, while the rest of him took refuge in thoughts of a crisp summer Dartmouth morning, a family sailing trip to the Narrows, a morning at anchor, with Marcus dozing at the aft of the small ship, his feet propped up on the gunwales. The sun churning diamonds around Robert and Samantha's swimming forms below him. He heard their laughter and remembered his own. The comfort of the memory twisted, hurting his heart. "I'll make it home," he promised himself. "I'll find you," he promised his family. The pools of effluent emptied out, and their feet echoed again on bare, dry rock. The sounds of the battle above had faded. They were past the fighting now. Past the fighting, Marcus thought. He skidded to a stop, turned to face the group, and braced Hobe, who almost bowled him over. "Marcus!" Hobe panted. "Not a good time to stop. We've got to get out." "Get out where?" Marcus shouted over him, then lowered his voice to a hiss once everyone was silent. "Don't you remember? Captain Geary." God take his soul, Marcus thought. "He told us the pirates collapsed the tunnel between Midway and the French side." "God's garters," Dr. Grace squeaked. "You mean we have to go back through that war zone?" Marcus thought about turning around, but he didn't fancy their chances if they did. He saw the same grim realization on Hobe and Lieutenant Burns' faces. He shook his head. "No, we—" The thought hit him like a pail of cold water. He reached out and grabbed Burns's collar. "The captain said they were leaving. Everyone was leaving, yes?" Confused, the soldier nodded. "Then so are we," Marcus decided, and set his course. "Oh, no," Hobe shouted. "No, Marcus, we're not getting on." "Oh, stiffen your britches, Mr. Martin," Dr. Grace said melodically, and slapped the man lightly on his cheeks. Burns stared from Hobe to the doctor. "Would one of you please tell me what exactly?" Another explosion, closer to them now, sent a gout of flame and a dozen shattered planks into the dung pits, which steamed and hissed. "Run now," Burns roared. "Talk later."
You have been listening to Asunder, the first in a series of tales after the War of the Worlds. For more information, please visit servingworlds.com. Music, Ibrido Umano, by Dano, available at danosongs.com. Title image, War of the Worlds, by Adam Blakemore. Learn more about Adam's artwork at blakey00.deviantart.com. Thank you for listening.